Luke 8:38 says, "The man who had been freed from the demons begged to go with him, but Jesus sent him home, saying, 'No, go back to your family and tell them everything God has done for you.' So he went all through the town, proclaiming the great things Jesus had done for him. On the other side of the lake, the crowds welcomed Jesus because they had been waiting for him. Then a man named Jairus, a leader of the local synagogue, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come home with him. His only daughter, who was about 12 years old, was dying. As Jesus went with him, he was surrounded by the crowds. A woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with a constant bleeding, and she could find no cure. Coming up behind Jesus, she touched the fringe of his robe. Immediately, the bleeding stopped. Coming up behind Jesus, she touched the fringe of his robe, and immediately the bleeding stopped. "Who touched me?" Jesus asked. Everyone denied it, and Peter said, "Master, this whole crowd is pressing up against you." But Jesus said, "Someone deliberately touched me, for I have felt healing power go out from me." When the woman realized that she could not stay hidden, she began to tremble and fell to her knees in front of him. The whole crowd heard her explain why she had touched him and that she had immediately been healed. The whole crowd heard it. "Daughter," he said to her, "your faith has made you well. Go in peace." Your faith has made you well. Go in peace. In other words, I didn't do anything. Your faith was that strong, it made you well. Go in peace. While he was still speaking to her, a messenger arrived from the home of Jairus, the leader of the synagogue. He told him, "Your daughter is dead. There's no use troubling the teacher now." But when Jesus heard what had happened, he said to Jairus, "Don't be afraid, just have faith, and she will be healed." When they arrived at the house, Jesus wouldn't let anyone go in with him except Peter, John, James, and the little girl's father and mother. The house was filled with people weeping and wailing, but he said, "Stop the weeping. She isn't dead. She's only asleep." But the crowd laughed at him because they all knew she had died. Then Jesus took her by the hand and said in a loud voice, "My child, get up." And at that moment, her life returned, and she immediately stood up. Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Her parents were overwhelmed, but Jesus insisted that they not tell anyone what happened. We're going to title this one, "What Had Happened." There's a lot going on in this text, a lot of good stuff. It reminds me of a movie that I've seen some years ago, and it I'm going to paraphrase how the movie went, but I believe the title of this movie is called 6 Degrees of Separation, and it described a moment in time. The premise of the movie was there was a car accident, and it told the story of everybody that was involved during the time frame of the accident. It gave their perspective from each car, from each eyewitness, what was going on at that exact time and in that exact moment. And it tells the story behind each individual. This passage reminds me of that because there was so much going on with all the individuals that were involved. If you look at it from the perspective of the woman that needed the healing, the woman with the issue of blood. Here we are in a crowd. She's heard the stories of Jesus. She's in dear desperation. The word says she deliberately touched me. as he was asking. He said, no, 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 somebody, this wasn't just someone bumping up against me. The desire from this woman, the intensity behind her need was so strong. The desperation was so strong that amongst all these people touching me, I felt her. I felt her. It takes me to it reminds me of some instances in my life where I was just that desperate that you could sense that I was in need. You could feel that I was in need. There was a level of desperation that it didn't matter what anybody thought. I needed Jesus now. I just need to be around him now. I've been heard so many stories. I've heard so many instances from had so many declarations from the doctor, or and heard so much negativity from people around me. I just needed to get right to the source because I realized that nobody else could help me. There was no one that could help me. It was the desperation that healed her. It was her faith knowing that I just needed you and I would be healed. Mind you, there was a crowd of people, and and all these people heard what was going on. So when I talk about the 6 degrees of separation, it wasn't just about her in that moment. The disciples who were amongst the crowd, Peter, who were amongst the crowd, was also, got a lesson in that. See, it wasn't just about her. In that moment, even Jesus got something out of it. Peter got something out of it. The rest of the crowd got something out of it. Peter understood at that moment. It took Peter to a next level of what God, or what Jesus, or what the level of faith actually looks like. Does that make sense? Because in Peter's mind, why are you asking me? Why are you asking us who touched you? Master, this whole crowd is pressing up against you. This doesn't make sense to me. Master, you're asking us who touched you. There's many people that touched you. Heck, I'm touching you. How are we supposed to point out or understand what you're saying? But that was a lesson for Peter in that moment. Here, Peter learned that, listen, you need to be more sensitive to your audience. This was a teaching moment from Jesus to Peter. It's a teaching moment for me. This week for me has been a teaching moment on how insensitive I can be if I'm not tapped in. If I'm only worried about me and the task at hand, I can miss out on a whole lot of things. I was in a conversation this week with some friends of mine, and we were on a subject and about our feelings. Meaning, I just don't feel like doing this. And my response was, do what's in your heart. Not even really understanding what I was saying. But the premise of that was learning to negate or ignore what you're feeling, because our flesh a lot of times does not want to do, most of the time, does not want to do anything that has anything to do with ministry, because it wants to do what it wants to do. And a lot of times for justifiable reasons. I'm tired. I worked all week. It's been a long week. My body is tired. I just want to go home and sit down. I get something to eat because I'm drained. And a ministry moment could be abandoned or ignored because we don't feel like it, and justifiably so. We don't feel like it. And my comment was on my, because I understood where they were coming from. I hear you, but what came out of my mouth was follow your heart. And see, your heart is different from your feelings. Hear me. Your heart, what God put in you, that beckoning, the Holy Spirit was saying, no, you need to go do that, because it wasn't about you in that moment. It's about what that other situation needed. It was about, don't miss this moment. Don't be insensitive to what your heart is telling you to do, or what I'm telling you to do, what the inner man is telling you to do, and it based on what you feel like. And that's something we must practice. Here it is. We're talking about Peter being in the position. Peter, I need you to be sensitive to your heart so you don't miss the moment. Because if I ask who touched me, that should have been a light bulb moment for you to wait a minute. Why is he asking that question? Not from a perspective of, what do you mean, God? Everybody's around there. I'm pressing up against you. The whole crowd is pressing up against you. That was a moment. Peter, tap in. Leonard, tap into what's going on around you. Be sensitive, not to just how you feel and what's going on, but be able to see beyond that. I think the term is, I can't see the trees because of the forest. Meaning when you're so close to something, you miss what's going on. I've been guilty of that even this week. I'm so close that I need, this is where you need a drone. Someone to give you an upper level view of what's going on in your own situation. So a lot of times hearing the Holy Spirit, who has that drone view to see the overall picture of what's going on, because he's tapped into God, where you tap into your feelings most of the time. We need that perspective. I need that overview. I need that big picture view so that I can see in totality what's going on, except seeing the crowd and all the people that are around me. In that same moment, Jairus comes up while Jesus is dealing with his healing power leaving out his body and addressing the young lady that needed healing, and when the whole crowd is getting the understanding of what just happened. He said, and as he says, daughter, your faith has made you well. In that same moment, while he was speaking to her, a messenger arrived from the home of Jairus, the leader of the synagogue, and saying, your daughter is dead. There's no use of troubling the teacher. Now, mind you, Jesus was on his way to see Jairus' daughter when the lady with the issue of blood tapped into him. And in the same moment, the same crowd that saw what happened with the lady of blood is also witnessing that the very destination that they were going to has been interrupted by a messenger saying, "There's no need to come. Your daughter's dead. No need to trouble the teacher now. You guys can turn around." You see all these different dynamics happening in this one moment. Jesus heard it, what happened, and he said, Jairus, don't be afraid. Just have a little faith, and she'll be healed. Now, Peter, James, John, everyone the disciples are in this crowd. Everyone is witnessing what's going on. The whole crowd is going with that too. And when they arrived at the house, he isolated them. He said, you know what? At this point, I just need the three of you, Peter, John, and James, and the little girl's mother and father. I need you to come with me. We have to separate ourselves from the people. Once again, there's a lot going on here. The house was, and when they get there, the house was filled with a whole bunch of people, weeping and wailing, and Jesus comes in and he says, stop all this weeping. She isn't dead. She's only asleep. And the crowd laughed. Once again, you got another audience. You've got another situation where you've got people that don't believe what's happening. They're not. They're more of a hindrance than they are anything else at this point. Look at everything that's going on. This is what had happened. Remember, the whole conversation is this is what had happened. So Jesus took the little girl by the hand, and he said in a loud voice, "Child, get up." Okay. And this is what he said. And at that moment, her life returned, and she immediately stood up. Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Her parents were overwhelmed, but Jesus insisted that they not tell anyone what had happened. Now, I started off this conversation, and we started off with the woman with the issues of blood. But even before that, before they crossed the lake, on the other side of the lake, Jesus had just freed the gentleman that was possessed with demons. And he told him at that point, go and tell everybody what had happened. So, once again, 60 degrees of separation. What had happened? And you got one instance where Jesus is saying, go and tell people what happened. Then you've got another situation where Jesus said, don't tell them what had happened. You got many different perspectives going on in this one event. What had happened? So I say this to say this. What's your story in what had happened? What's your story? I can tell you many stories of what had happened to me in my times of desperations with my children, when I had to risk my life to save them, when I had to cry out to save them. But then there's also some times where what had happened is not to be said, because the people around you are not going to understand. It's going to do more harm than good. But in all these moments, there's things to be said. There's things to not be said. There's things to be meditated on from the disciples' perspective. In the learning experiences, there's things that you take note of and you make adjustments. You don't necessarily have to make declarations about them. There's something in it for everybody and for every situation. It's not just about your perspective. There's many other perspectives. And we have to put ourselves in a position where we're sensitive to everything that's going on and everybody that's involved. I hope this makes sense to you today. It's not just about me. And it's not just about what I feel like doing today. It's about listening to my heart and doing what my heart says. It's about tapping into other people. It's about making sure that my needs are not just met, but other people's needs are met. It's not just about doing the duties that we can all get caught up in the crowd. It's so many things that happens in the crowd. There's so many stories that go on in the crowd that you have to know it's not just about you. Every interaction that you have, there needs to be an exchange. There is an exchange. Is it a good exchange? Are you missing out on something? Should you be speaking to somebody that you chose not to because you didn't feel like it? I know this is not one of them shouting messages, but I hope it helped somebody today. It helped me this week to understand that it's not just about me. Pay attention to your complete surroundings so that you will not be taken away from somebody else's blessing. I hope this helps. You have a good day. We'll talk soon.